Hey everyone, hope you guys are doing good today. So today I'm going to continue with the same series that I started the other day. So this series are characters that bring your writing to life. Basically, characters that help inspire the writing process and how that works for me. So today, this installment of the series is going to be about Kiriana. So Kiriana is a character that is in DragonsFire, and she is typically one of most people's favorite characters for good reason. She's pretty kick-ass. And what I'd like to do is kind of explain a little bit about where she came from, the thought process, and how that basically propelled me to writing the story. So when I initially started writing DragonsFire, I really didn't know what the story was going to turn into. That's a conversation for probably another time. I initially thought it was going to be maybe a episodic type of publish it serial idea. Didn't really know what the story was going to be or where it was going to go initially, but I had an idea for a few characters that I really wanted to get into and just wanted to see what was going to happen with them. It was very early in my writing career, so I hadn't really figured out how I write best. So I was totally gardening, just totally spontaneously writing and seeing what would grow out of that. Not that type of writer as much anymore, now that I've kind of honed my style and kind of figured out what works for me. But initially, one of the three main characters that inspired me to write DragonsFire was going to be this very strong female lead character, but I didn't want to be cliche and I didn't want it to be a token female character either. So I really wanted to develop this female character who could live in a man's world, so to speak, and that she could do all the things that the dudes could do. She could do it just as well, if not better, but I didn't want her just to be this badass female warrior who didn't have a backstory, who didn't have depth, who didn't have character. So I had this idea for this strong, somewhat silent type of female character who has a deep strength that's more than just her prowess with weapons and martial skills and stealth and these type of things, because she is a master slayer. She's an assassin plus, so she's one of the masters in her order. But there's a lot more to her. She is a leader in a lot of ways. She is very strong-willed. She's determined. She has phenomenal discipline. But she is a very strong and often silent character. But what makes her different than a lot of other silent characters is a lot of times, I think in stories, you have a cliche of a strong silent type, and a lot of times they're this brooding type that all the darkness in the world is on the inside and they're just trying to keep it at bay. And well, that's really not the story with Kiriana. So and I won't go into a whole lot of details because I want to make sure we're spoiler free here. But what readers will find out with Kiriana is that there's a lot of times where she doesn't have a whole lot to say. She comes across as very guarded, very reserved in situations where she's not thrust into the leadership role of a situation where she doesn't have to take charge. She won't unless it's necessary. On the battlefield is different, but in social situations she's definitely more guarded, more reserved. But there's reasons for that, and you get to experience a little bit of that in DragonsFire. So it's really about who this person is as a character. It's about that backstory. So when I had this idea for this character, I wanted to have this strong, silent female type who could lead. She could be on the front lines of battle. She could be leading and making the tough decisions with soldiers and with armies and with combat and with missions. So she could definitely lead. She wasn't a background character or a token character, but there were real legitimate reasons in her past why she was this guarded person, this reserved person, rather than just being that, she's this person who's full of, darkness that's ready to snap at any time. And for her, there's pain there. There's stuff that she's dealt with. There's trauma that she's dealt with that hasn't been resolved. But it's her reasons for the way she acts are kind of something that the readers will start to discover a little bit through DragonsFire, but a lot more through the rest of the series. But really, when I was writing the book, I really wanted to go through a process of letting the readers really understand, okay, so why is she this person who can lead an army, she can lead a team of assassins, or she can help orchestrate the defense of a city. She can do these things. She's totally capable, totally competent, has all the skills to do that, all the ability to do that. But in a social situation, in a mess hall, for example, like we see in DragonsFire, she comes across as totally socially awkward and uncomfortable and guarded and just a character that often would be easily dismissed, except for the fact that you're like, hey, wait a second, that's how come in one situation she's this strong, powerful, leading lady, and then in another situation she comes across as awkward and clunky. And for me, that was like, I have a great opportunity here. I can really write out a story to help explain where she's come from. So when I'm envisioning this character, I'm thinking, okay, I have this idea for this character that I want to create. I want to share this idea of this strong, independent woman who is totally awkward in certain situations and has parts that really make her uncomfortable. She can go into battle and she can be surrounded by enemies, and she can be protecting people that are totally defenseless and just go into that situation with seemingly reckless abandon. But you put her in a social situation and she seems totally defenseless and totally out of her element. And why is that? So situations like that, when we're dealing with character development, that really encourages me on a few levels. At first, it encourages me to really help me discover that, because sometimes when we're writing stories, we're writing about a character, you might not know initially why that character is the way that they are. You might have an idea, you might have some things that you know about that character's backstory or their personality that make them the way they are, but getting to explore that's part of that gardening process where you're in there, you're writing and you're kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen. Now, some people, and more of my writing now, I typically have a pretty good idea of where the story is going to go, and I kind of have the markers or the waypoints out for the journey, and we do the discovery on the way to those waypoints. But that's a really fun part of the process, and I highly encourage any other writers out there to, if that works for you, dive in, go ahead, but don't be afraid to take the time to explore those things. Don't just have a character who just acts a certain way just because. Don't be afraid to take the time to explore that backstory, explore that character's depth and their psychology, or just the trauma that they've been through, or their experiences, whatever it is. Feel free to dive into that and allow your readers to explore that with you. And that's the best part, is when you have as a writer, when you go ahead and you start writing a story about a character, you are creating a person that the readers really want to relate to. They want to gravitate to these characters. They want to pick them up. They want to claim them as their own. They want to say, Kiriana is one of my favorite characters because. And so you have a great opportunity. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead and say, okay, well, I'm going to make this character is going to really stand out because this person who has all these strengths also has all these weaknesses, has all these flaws, all these imperfections or idiosyncrasies, if you will. So getting to write those things out, that is such a fun process, and it's so rewarding. Like we were talking about in the last video, 𝓓𝓞𝓏𝓚, and I don't want to get off Kiriana here too long, but the one reason that 𝓓𝓞 was so fun is because I mentioned he has all these strengths. He's a mighty champion, but he has all these issues. He has all these hang-ups and all these weaknesses. Well, that makes him so relatable. I can't tell you how many times I have people saying, I really loved this character because they were so relatable to me. I could really relate to 𝓓𝓞 because of his struggles, and even if the struggles aren't the same for that particular person, they might have a different thing that they struggle with in their life, but they're being able to relate to that character. And a lot of times when we're writing, whether it's fiction or whatever, we want to write characters that they're fun, they're exciting, they're otherworldly and outlandish, and over the top crazy with different personalities and wit and charm and all their flaws and stuff. But a lot of times we want characters that really just come across as, wow, I know that this is a fantasy world, but I can really see the dilemma that this character is facing in this situation. Or, you know what, if I went through that situation, or I did go through a situation, I can really see how that character really would struggle with this. And so, even though we're writing fiction, it's about connecting with the readers. It's about connecting with the audience. So with Kiriana, I really wanted to get into some of the issues that are very relatable. Now, I'll save those issues out of this discussion, or I'll leave them out of this discussion for the sake of avoiding spoilers. But I think what happens is when characters, or when people read through the stories of these characters, especially here in DragonsFire, here's a shot of the cover, by the way, for those who haven't seen it. So, DragonsFire, what people will see is that they get in, they start understanding a little bit about Kiriana's backstory. Yeah, she's this awesome, totally badass master slayer, and she's at the top of her order, and she's one of the deadliest assassins that exists in the world that we know of at the time anyways. And here she is, and in some ways she's a young woman who has all these skills, but sometimes she's still a broken girl. So there's a little juxtaposition there, and getting to explore that, the readers really just love it. They grab a hold of that character, and I can't tell you how often people are like, wow, I have a few favorite characters, and it's usually 𝓤𝓞𝓝, and it's usually 𝕨𝕨𝕨, and it's usually Kiriana. And so, and there's others, and some people prefer one more than the other or whatever, and that's really cool. There is variety, but she is always one of the biggest favorites from the book out of DragonsFire. And so, I know that when I have that response from readers that they gravitate to certain characters, I say, hey, so what did I do right with that character? What are areas where I can take that and I can build that further? Well, a lot of people loved with Kiriana, they loved that nice balance that they had her strengths, they had her weaknesses, they see where she struggled, they see the places where she had real emotions and real challenges. She wasn't this robotic person who just, she wasn't just this woman who could slaughter, legions of enemies and then not have emotional challenges and not have struggles and weaknesses and places where she faced defeat. That's not who she was, because that's not real. So I know we're writing fantasy, so what's real anyways, but you still want the characters to be relatable, and I think that's one of the things that I've done well with the book. As I mentioned before, so with Kiriana, she's a character that I had a very strong visual image of who that character needed to be before I really even got into the writing. So with her, she's this very athletic and lithe female character with an assortment of blades and daggers and crossbows, and she has long cloaks and is garbed kind of like a ranger or an assassin, and she has this striking fiery red hair, and she's just this really awesome badass looking character. And then from there, how does she fit into this world? What is her story? And then we get into, all the backstory and everything of what really drives that character, the real depth, the real meat and potatoes there. So before I go any further, because there's a lot I'd love to say about Kiriana, but I don't know how to do some of it without spoilers and stuff like that. What I would like to do is read a quick excerpt from the beginning of DragonsFire and just give you a little introduction to Mistress Kiriana. So here we go. The bandits had fought their way into the heart of the city, leaving a wake of destruction in their path. As they approached the courtyard, they saw before them the great hall of 𝕨𝕨𝕨𝕨. The massive tower marked the center of the city. There, before the tower in the courtyard, stood a detachment of 20 warriors. The ornately armored royal guard stood ready to give their lives in the defense of the tower and their king. Closing in around them in an arcing formation stood the savage murderers. The elven guard hoisted their glaives and stood behind their tall angular shields. Vastly outnumbered, they prepared for their final battle. As if preparing a sacrificial offering, the robed warriors slowly raised their blades in unison, their ritualistic gesture a precursor to slaughter. Bursting into an evil roar, the robed men charged toward the elven guard with their blades held high. As the raiders swarmed the guards, bolts sliced through the courtyard air. Howls of pain tried to escape as bolts plunged deep into their unarmored bodies. Stumbling to the ground, dozens of the attackers clutched their wounds. Another hail of bolts was loosed as 10 hooded riders burst into the courtyard. The mystery assailants wore long, dark cloaks atop their black steeds. Wielding crossbows, they fired unerringly upon the robed men, striking them down in rapid succession. The guards' eyes all shifted to one rider, a fearless assassin standing out from the rest. This hooded hero held a compact repeater bow in each hand. Twisting and leaning gracefully in the saddle, the rider launched a storm of death upon the robed men. In the 2s and 3s they fell to the ground until the courtyard was cleared of the bandits. "Make sure the rest of the city is cleared. Finish them," came the confident voice of the lead rider. "Yes, mistress," replied the 9 riders. The leader of the pack of riders leapt down from the horse as the other 9 tore off through the village. She, removing the dark hood, revealed a fiery head of wild orange and red hair draped around a pale yet graceful face. The fire of the torchlight danced in her green eyes. She looked at the royal guard, who simply stared at her in awe. Then quickly she shifted her focus to one of the slain men at their feet. Moving toward the corpse, she bent down and peeled back his hood. "𝓤𝓞𝓝," she informed. "They are the 𝓤𝓞𝓝. See these markings on their forehead and face?" A great deal of the skin on the man's face had become a twisted black and was full of scarring, and in the middle of his forehead there was a dragon in the shape of a backwards S. The unmistakable mark of the 𝓤𝓞𝓝 was burned into his flesh. "We have been tracking their movement for days. We got there as fast as we could," she told them. "We cannot thank you enough," rose a voice as one of the guards stepped forward. Removing his helm, he revealed his face, and he took a knee and bowed to his rescuer. "In reverence," she replied with her eyes, "no king shall bow to me, your highness." Okay, so that little excerpt there is from one of the early chapters in DragonsFire, where Kiriana first really comes onto the scene and you get to experience her. I won't give you too many of the details on that, but basically you see this intriguing, mysterious woman who is clearly in charge and totally capable, who bursts onto the scene. She really gets a lot of people excited in the story early on. It's cool that readers get exposed to her so early on in the story. A little taste of that there. She's definitely one of the fan favorites. There are some other fan favorites that I'd like to get to in the next couple days. In no particular order, I'm not sure which way I'll get to them, but we definitely will talk about Theros Hammerfist. Interestingly enough, he's an orc, and he's probably one of my personal favorites. And then there's Dominar, and Dominar is a dwarf. And interestingly enough, those two are best friends. So a little different there than what you normally get in fantasy. But those two guys are two of most people's favorite characters. Kiriana probably comes in second to that pair. So I'm really excited about talking about those guys in the next video in this series, and kind of share with you guys where those characters came from, my thought processes, what makes those characters a little bit unique. And as always, I'll try to keep it free of spoilers as much as I can, but those characters are both from DragonsFire as well. So hope you guys like this video. If you have specific questions about these characters, about the video, about my writing process, or about any of the things that we've talked about here, or if there's other specific characters you'd like me to talk about in future videos, please leave a comment. And as always, please hit the like and the subscribe buttons here at the end. All right, you guys have a great day, and love you all. Take care.